Felix discovers a shocking message about Hyunjin's fiance, forcing hidden truths, broken trust, and impossible choices to collide. Truth, Hyungjin. Tell me the truth before I lose everything. Felix's voice shattered the silence of the apartment before the phone slipped from his trembling hand and crashed against the wooden floor. The screen remained lit, displaying the message that had turned the warmth of an ordinary evening into something unbearably cold. She's waiting for you. Your fiancé deserves to know when you'll announce everything. For several endless seconds, neither of them moved. The rain hammered against the windows, the sound blending with Felix's uneven breathing. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee still lingered in the room, but it no longer felt comforting. Every familiar object suddenly looked foreign, as though the apartment itself had become a stage for a nightmare neither of them had rehearsed. Hyunjin stood near the kitchen island, frozen. His eyes widened not with guilt alone, but with fear, not the fear of being caught, the fear of losing the person standing in front of him. Felix stared at him with tears gathering faster than he could hide them. His heartbeat thundered inside his ears until it drowned out every other sound. I wasn't searching through your phone, Felix whispered. It lit up while you were in the shower. His voice cracked. I wish I had never looked. Hyunjin slowly walked forward. Felix, don't. Single word stopped him instantly. Felix had always been the first to smile after every argument, the first to apologize even when he wasn't wrong. He hated conflict. He believed people deserved second chances before explanations were even finished. Tonight was different. Tonight his smile had disappeared completely. What is this? Felix asked, pointing toward the shattered phone. Who is she? Hyunjin lowered his eyes. Silence answered before words ever could. Felix laughed bitterly. Known you for years. His hands trembled uncontrollably. I defended you every time people misunderstood you. I trusted you when everyone else doubted you. Painful pause settled between them. Were all those promises meaningless? Hyunjin closed his eyes. They weren't. Then explain. His voice had become almost impossibly soft. Please. Outside, lightning illuminated the living room in brief flashes of white, revealing every expression that darkness tried to hide. Hyunjin inhaled deeply. My family arranged an engagement months ago. Felix felt the world tilt beneath him. What? I never accepted it. You never told me. I couldn't. Felix repeated the word as if testing whether it carried any meaning anymore. You couldn't tell the person you claimed mattered most. Hyunjin's shoulders sagged. My parents built their entire future around that decision. My father's company depends on the partnership. My mother believes refusing would destroy everything our family spent decades creating. Felix looked away. So you decided to destroy me instead. The words struck harder than shouting ever could. Hyunjin's breathing became shallow. I kept searching for the right moment. There is no right moment to tell someone they've been living inside a lie. Felix wiped away tears with the sleeve of his sweater, frustrated that more kept falling. He remembered every small memory, late-night conversations, shared meals. Birthday surprises, long walks beneath autumn skis, the promises that tomorrow would always include both of them. Now every memory seemed wrapped in uncertainty. Was any of it real? Hyunjin stepped closer despite Felix's hesitation. I loved every moment with you. Felix laughed again, this time it sounded exhausted. Do you know what hurts most? Hyunjin remained silent. I believe you. That confession hurt them both. I believe you loved me. Felix's voice trembled. And somehow that makes this even worse. Apartment seemed too quiet, only the rain continued speaking. Hyunjin reached into his jacket pocket and slowly removed a small velvet box. Felix stared at it in disbelief. I bought this 3 months ago. Hyunjin carefully opened it. Inside rested a simple silver ring. I wanted to give this to you. Felix's expression collapsed completely. Then why didn't you? Because I was a coward. No excuses, no elaborate lies. Only one devastating truth. I thought I could solve everything before anyone got hurt. Felix looked at the untouched ring, imagining all the futures that would never exist. You don't solve pain by hiding it. I know, you only make it grow. Hyunjin nodded. I know. Honesty in those words made forgiveness feel both closer and impossibly distant. Felix slowly sat on the edge of the sofa, covering his face with both hands. His chest ached with every breath, not because he had stopped loving Hyunjin. Because he hadn't, that was the cruelest part. Love did not disappear simply because trust had broken. Sometimes love stayed behind, forcing people to grieve someone who was still standing only a few steps away. Hyunjin knelt in front of him. Already decided. Felix looked up through tear-filled eyes. I'm ending the engagement tomorrow. You should have done that before today. I know. I don't even know if it changes anything. I know. Hyunjin accepted every accusation without resistance because none of them were unfair. He had allowed fear to make decisions that honesty should have made. Outside, the rain gradually softened. The apartment no longer echoed with shouting. Only quiet breathing remained. Felix looked toward the window where droplets slowly traced uncertain paths down the glass. I always believed the strongest people were the ones who never cried. He smiled weakly. I was wrong. Hyunjin listened carefully. The strongest people are the ones willing to tell the truth before it becomes too late. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. The silence no longer felt hostile. It felt tired, wounded, human. Eventually Felix stood and gently picked up the broken phone from the floor. The cracked screen reflected both their faces side by side, distorted by shattered glass. Perhaps that reflection resembled them now, broken, but still capable of showing something real. Felix handed the phone back. "I can't promise forgiveness today." Hyungjin accepted it with shaking hands. "Not asking for it. I need time." "Wait." Felix nodded slowly. For the first time that night, there were no lies left inside the room, only consequences. The future remained uncertain, but the unbearable weight of hidden secrets had finally disappeared. Sometimes the truth arrives too late to save what was broken. Sometimes it arrives just early enough to give two hearts the chance to decide, freely and honestly, whether they are willing to rebuild from the ruins. The morning arrived without sunlight. A thick blanket of grey clouds covered the city, turning every street into a faded reflection of the restless night that neither Felix nor Hyungjin had truly escaped. Rainwater clung to the apartment windows in thin trails, distorting the skyline into blurred shapes. Inside, silence had replaced the desperate arguments, but it carried a heavier weight than any shouted accusation. Felix woke on the living room sofa, still wearing yesterday's sweater. His neck ached and his eyes burned from hours of interrupted sleep. For a brief moment, he hoped everything had been a nightmare. Then he noticed the cracked phone resting on the coffee table. Reality returned all at once. The message, the engagement, the confession, every memory crashed back into him with merciless clarity. He sat up slowly and glanced toward the hallway. Hyunjin's bedroom door remained closed. Neither of them had found the courage to speak again after midnight. Words had simply run out. Felix walked quietly into the kitchen and switched on the kettle. The familiar whistle that usually brought comfort only emphasized how unfamiliar everything now felt. As he waited for the water to boil, he remembered the first time Hyungjin had insisted on making coffee for him. Hyungjin had laughed after accidentally spilling sugar across the counter, insisting that perfection was overrated. Felix smiled without realizing it. The smile disappeared just as quickly. Some memories had become painful overnight. A door creaked open behind him. Hyungjin stepped into the kitchen, looking exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes, and his usually confident posture had given way to visible uncertainty. "Morning," he said quietly. Felix nodded without meeting his gaze. "Morning." Hyungjin noticed the untouched coffee cup beside the kettle. "You didn't sleep. Neither did you." Another silence settled between them. Hyungjin finally spoke. "I'm going to meet my parents today." Felix slowly looked up. "So you're really doing it?" "I have to." His voice lacked hesitation. "I should have done it months ago." Felix wanted to believe him. Part of him already did. Another part refused to trust so easily. What if they refuse? Hyungjin exhaled deeply. "They probably will, and then I'll still end it." Felix studied his expression carefully. There was fear in Hyunjin's eyes, but beneath the fear stood something stronger, determination. For the first time since discovering the message, Felix saw someone who wasn't trying to hide behind excuses. Hyunjin was finally ready to face the consequences. "I don't expect you to wait for me," Hyunjin admitted. "Not asking you to believe anything I say today." Felix wrapped both hands around the warm mug. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel anymore. You don't have to decide today. I keep asking myself if the person I loved was real." Hyunjin answered almost immediately. He was. His voice broke. He just wasn't brave enough. Honesty strung. Felix wished anger were easier than compassion. Anger created distance. Compassion forced him to remember every beautiful part of the man standing before him. Hours later, Hyunjin stood outside his parents' elegant home. The mansion looked exactly as it always had. Perfect gardens, polished stone walls, expensive cars lining the driveway. Everything appeared flawless. Only Hyunjin knew how fragile that perfection truly was. His mother welcomed him with a gentle smile. "You came early." "Need to talk?" She sensed the seriousness immediately. His father joined them in the study minutes later. The room smelled of old books and expensive wood polish. No one spoke first. Finally, Hyunjin inhaled. "I'm cancelling the engagement." Sentence landed like thunder. His mother's smile vanished. His father's expression hardened instantly. "What did you say?" "I'm ending it." His father stood slowly. "Do you understand what you're saying?" "Yes." "Do you understand what this family will lose?" Hyunjin nodded. "I do." His father slammed his hand against the desk. "No, don't. This engagement isn't about romance. It's about responsibility." Hyunjin remained calm. "I know, then stop acting like a child." "I spent months acting like one." His voice remained steady. "I'm done." His mother's eyes filled with tears. "People will ask questions. They deserve honest answers." His father shook his head in disbelief. "Is this because of Felix?" Hyunjin refused to lie again. "Yes." Room fell silent. His father laughed bitterly. "You would throw away your future for someone." Hyunjin looked directly into his father's eyes. "I'm trying to stop throwing away the person I love." Those words echoed through the study. For the first time, Hyunjin felt lighter, not because everything had been solved, because nothing remained hidden back at the apartment. Felix wandered through familiar rooms that suddenly felt too large. He paused before a bookshelf where dozens of photographs rested in simple wooden frames. Vacations, concerts, late-night dinners, birthdays, smiles that now carried complicated meanings. He reached for one photograph. It showed Hyunjin laughing while trying to cook dinner. The memory remained genuine, even if the future had become uncertain. Felix realized something he hadn't allowed himself to admit. He wasn't mourning a lie. He was mourning the version of their life that could have existed if fear had never entered it. As evening approached, the apartment door finally opened. Hyungjin returned. His shoulders were tense, but his eyes carried an unfamiliar calm. "It's over," he said softly. Felix searched his face for signs of uncertainty. There were none. "My parents disowned me." The words hung quietly between them. "They told me not to come back." Felix's heart tightened. "I'm sorry." Hyungjin shook his head. "No, I'm sorry. I should have protected us before it came to this." Felix walked toward him slowly. For a long moment, neither reached out, neither stepped away. They simply stood there, separated by only a few inches and months of unspoken fear. Finally, Felix spoke. "I still don't know if my heart can trust you again." Hyungjin nodded. "I know," but he took a slow breath. For the first time since yesterday, his eyes softened. "I believe you're finally telling me the whole truth." Neither of them smiled. Healing, they both understood, would never begin with happiness. It would begin with honesty. The apartment had never felt so quiet, not because there were no sounds, but because every sound seemed amplified. The ticking clock in the hallway, the humming refrigerator, the distant traffic beyond the rain-speckled windows, everything reminded Felix that life outside continued as if nothing had changed. Inside, however, everything had. Hyungjin placed his keys on the table and slowly removed his jacket. His movements were careful, almost hesitant, as though he feared even the smallest noise might shatter the fragile peace that had begun to form between them. Felix watched from across the room. "You really have nowhere to go now." Hyungjin gave a faint nod. "My father told me not to come back." "Your mother," a shadow crossed Hyunjin's face. She cried, but she didn't stop him. The words settled heavily between them. Felix lowered his eyes. He had imagined many outcomes when Hyunjin said he would end the engagement, but he had never expected such a painful price. No one should have to choose between the family that raised them and the person they loved. Yet Hyunjin had, not because it was easy, because for the first time he refused to let fear make his choices. "I don't want your sympathy," Hyunjin said quietly. Felix looked up. "I'm not giving you sympathy." He paused. "I'm giving you honesty." Hyunjin's expression softened. "I'm still hurt. I know. I'm still angry. I know. I still don't understand why you thought carrying all of this alone was protecting anyone." Hyunjin leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. "My whole life I was taught that being strong meant solving problems by myself." He gave a bitter smile. "I confused silence with strength." Felix remained silent. "My father never asked how I felt," Hyunjin continued. "He only asked whether I could handle more responsibility. Eventually, I stopped believing my own feelings mattered. Confession didn't erase the pain, but it explained it." For the first time, Felix could see the frightened young man hidden behind Hyunjin's confidence, the one who had spent years believing that love was something to be sacrificed for duty. That night, they shared dinner in near silence. Neither of them pretended everything was normal. They simply existed in the same space, allowing the quiet to heal what words could not. Halfway through the meal, Hyunjin's phone vibrated. He stared at the screen. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Hello," a woman's voice answered, calm, gentle. "Hyunjin, it's me." Felix instinctively looked toward him. Hyunjin's expression changed. "I'm sorry," the woman said softly. "I heard what happened." Hyunjin closed his eyes. "I should have called you months ago." "You should have." There was no anger in her voice, only sadness. "I knew you didn't love me." Hyunjin froze. "You knew?" She gave a quiet laugh. "Known since our second meeting." His grip on the phone tightened. "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because my family wanted this marriage as much as yours did." A painful silence followed. "I hoped," she admitted, "that maybe one day we would both become happy enough to pretend." Felix listened without interrupting. "I was wrong." Woman sighed. "You deserve to be with the person you truly love." Hyunjin's eyes filled with tears. "So do you. I think we'll both have that chance now." Before ending the call, she added one final sentence. "Waste the freedom you fought for today." Line went dead. Hyunjin lowered the phone slowly. Felix spoke first. "She sounds kind. She deserved the truth too." Hyunjin nodded. "She did." The first time, neither of them felt hatred toward the woman who had almost become Hyunjin's fiance. She had never been the enemy, fear had been. Later that evening, Felix stepped onto the apartment balcony. The rain had finally stopped. Fresh air carried the scent of wet earth and blooming flowers from the courtyard below. Hyunjin joined him a few minutes later but kept a respectful distance. "Been thinking," Felix said. "About us." Felix nodded. "I keep asking myself whether broken trust can ever become whole again." Hyunjin didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "Maybe it doesn't." Felix frowned slightly. "Maybe it becomes something different." Hyunjin looked toward the city lights shimmering beneath the damp streets. "Maybe trust rebuilt after the truth is stronger than trust built before it." Felix considered those words. Perhaps he wasn't searching for the relationship they used to have. Perhaps that version had ended the moment the hidden message appeared. If they were ever going to move forward, they would have to build something entirely new, something that could survive honesty. Felix turned toward Hyunjin. "I can't promise what tomorrow looks like. You don't have to." But he stepped a little closer. "I don't want fear deciding my future either." The first time in days, Hyungjin allowed himself a small, genuine smile, not a smile of victory, a smile of hope. The road ahead remained uncertain, filled with difficult conversations, lingering wounds, and memories that would take time to stop hurting. Yet as the clouds slowly parted and the first stars appeared above the city, both of them understood that healing never began with forgetting the past. It began with choosing, every single day, not to hide from the truth again.
Several weeks passed. The city slowly exchanged endless rain for clear blue mornings, yet Felix still found himself waking before sunrise. Some habits refused to disappear, especially those born from heartbreak. Life had settled into a quiet rhythm. Hyungjin had found a small design studio willing to hire him despite the rumors that had begun circulating after he left his family's company. The apartment no longer felt haunted by constant silence. They spoke more often now, about work, music, books, and ordinary things that once seemed insignificant, but neither of them rushed to define what they were. Some wounds healed best without pressure. One Saturday afternoon, Felix was organizing old boxes in the storage room when he discovered a worn photo album tucked behind several forgotten suitcases. Curious, he carried it into the living room. Hyungjin looked up from his laptop. "What's that?" "I don't know." Dust drifted into the sunlight as Felix opened the cover. Inside were photographs from years ago. There was Hyungjin as a teenager, smiling awkwardly beside his parents. Another showed him standing proudly in front of an art exhibition, his sketchbook clutched tightly against his chest. Felix smiled. "Never seen these." Hyungjin walked over and sat beside him. "I thought they were gone." They turned another page. A folded letter slipped from between the photographs and landed softly on the floor. The paper had yellowed with age. Hyungjin frowned. "I remember this." He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting belonged to his late grandfather. Hyunjin's hands trembled as he began to read. "If you are reading this, it means you have grown into the man I always hoped you would become. Never mistake obedience for kindness and never mistake silence for love. The people who truly love you will never ask you to become someone else just to keep them happy. Courage is not refusing to cry. Courage is telling the truth even when it costs you everything." Hyungjin stopped reading, his vision blurred with tears. He had spent years believing he was honoring his family. Instead, he had been ignoring the wisdom of the person who understood him best. Felix quietly placed a hand over Hyunjin's. "He would have been proud of you." Hyunjin swallowed hard. "I don't know." "Do." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt peaceful. Not because life had become perfect, but because the weight of secrets had finally disappeared. That evening, Felix suggested they walk through the nearby park. Children laughed as they chased one another across the grass. Elderly couples strolled beneath rows of flowering trees and musicians filled the air with gentle melodies. Everything felt wonderfully ordinary. As they crossed a small bridge overlooking the river, Felix stopped walking. "Been afraid?" Hyungjin turned toward him. "Of what?" "That one day I'll remember all this pain more than I'll remember why I loved you." Hyungjin lowered his gaze. "Been afraid too? Losing me again?" "No." Felix looked surprised. "I'm afraid of becoming the person who hides things." He took a slow breath. "Never want fear to speak louder than honesty again." Felix studied him carefully. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, only quiet sincerity. Felix reached into his jacket pocket and removed the small silver ring Hyungjin had shown him weeks earlier. Hyunjin's eyes widened. "You kept it?" Felix smiled softly. "I asked the jeweler to repair the scratches." He placed the ring in Hyunjin's palm. "I can't wear it today." Hyunjin's expression fell slightly, though he nodded in understanding. "I know. I don't want you to throw it away." Hyungjin looked at the ring shining beneath the evening sun. "It doesn't represent a promise we've already made." Felix's voice remained calm. "It represents one we'll have to earn." A gentle breeze rippled across the river. Hyungjin carefully closed his fingers around the ring. "Earn it." Felix believed him, not because Hyungjin was flawless, but because he had finally learned that love could never survive without truth. They resumed walking together as the sky slowly turned shades of gold and violet. For the first time in a long while, neither of them was chasing the past. They were simply moving forward, one honest step at a time, carrying the scars of yesterday not as reminders of failure, but as proof that even broken trust could become the foundation of something stronger when two hearts chose honesty over fear. Autumn arrived quietly. Golden leaves drifted through the city streets, covering sidewalks that Felix and Hyungjin now walked together almost every evening. Their conversations had become easier. Laughter returned in small moments during grocery shopping, while cooking dinner, or when Hyungjin absent-mindedly sang the wrong lyrics to songs playing on the radio. Life was beginning to feel normal again, not the old normal. A new one built carefully day by day. One afternoon, Felix was helping organize an exhibition at the Community Arts Center where he had recently started volunteering. The gallery buzzed with visitors, their voices blending with soft piano music that echoed through the spacious hall. Hyungjin entered carrying a bouquet of white lilies. "They're beautiful," Felix said with a smile. "I remembered they're your favorite." Felix accepted the flowers, surprised. "You remembered? I've been paying attention." Felix laughed quietly. "You always paid attention." Hyungjin shook his head. "I noticed things," he smiled gently, "but I didn't always understand them." Before Felix could answer, a familiar voice interrupted. "Hyungjin." Both of them turned. Standing near the entrance was Hyunjin's mother. She looked different. Her elegant posture remained, but the confidence she had always carried had softened into something quieter. For a long moment no one moved. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Hyunjin finally said. "I wasn't sure either." She looked toward Felix. "I hoped I could speak with both of you." They found a quiet corner of the gallery overlooking a small garden. Autumn leaves floated across the stone path outside. Hyunjin's mother folded her hands together. "Oh, both of you, an apology." Neither Felix nor Hyunjin interrupted. "I spent years believing that protecting our family's reputation was the same as protecting my son." Her voice trembled. "I see now that I was protecting an image, while losing the person who mattered most." Hyunjin looked down. "I wanted to stop your father," she continued, "but I was afraid." The word echoed painfully, afraid. The same fear that had shaped so many of their choices. "I watched you grow up believing that love meant sacrifice." Tears filled her eyes. "I never realized you learned that from us." Hyunjin slowly reached across the table. His mother looked surprised as he gently held her hand. "I was angry," he admitted honestly. "I still have things I'm trying to forgive." She nodded through tears. "I understand. I don't want us to spend the rest of our lives pretending we don't miss each other." His mother's composure finally broke. She began crying openly. "I'm so sorry." Hyunjin stood and embraced her. For months he had imagined this moment. He thought forgiveness would feel dramatic. Instead, it felt quiet, gentle, like a door slowly opening after being closed for far too long. Felix watched from a respectful distance. He understood that some wounds belonged to families alone. Later that evening, the three of them shared coffee at a nearby cafe. Conversation was awkward at first, but slowly memories replaced silence. Hyunjin's mother laughed while telling stories from his childhood. Felix listened as he learned things Hyunjin had never mentioned, like how Hyunjin used to hide injured birds in his bedroom until they recovered, or how he once spent weeks painting a picture for his grandfather instead of buying a birthday gift. "Always tried to save everyone," Felix said. Hyunjin smiled sheepishly. "Guess I have." His mother looked at him warmly. This time, she glanced toward Felix. "Don't forget to save yourself too." As sunset painted the sky in warm shades of orange and crimson, they left the cafe together. Hyunjin walked between the two people he loved most. One represented his past, the other represented his future. For the first time, those two worlds no longer felt destined to collide. Felix slipped his hand into Hyunjin's. Hyunjin looked at him with quiet surprise. Felix smiled. Not because every scar had disappeared, but because healing no longer felt impossible. Sometimes forgiveness wasn't forgetting what happened. Sometimes it was accepting that people could grow beyond the worst decisions they had ever made. As they continued walking beneath the falling autumn leaves, Hyunjin realized that the greatest truth he had ever spoken had not been the confession that ended his engagement. It was every honest word that came afterward. Those words had not erased the pain. They had simply made room for hope, and for the first time in a very long while, hope was enough to carry them toward whatever tomorrow might bring. Winter arrived with quiet snow that transformed the city into a landscape of white and silver. The cold air carried a sharp freshness, and every rooftop shimmered beneath the morning light. From the apartment window, Felix watched the first snowfall while wrapping both hands around a mug of hot chocolate. Behind him, Hyunjin was struggling to decorate a small pine tree they had bought from a neighborhood market. "Star keeps falling," Hyunjin muttered. Felix laughed. "Maybe you're putting it on upside down." "I refuse to believe a star has an upside down." Felix walked over and gently adjusted the ornament. This time it stayed in place. "There," Hyunjin smiled. "I knew inviting you was the right decision." Felix raised an eyebrow. "Inviting me? We live together." "I know," Hyunjin chuckled. "I still like saying it." Apartment once filled with painful silence now echoed with quiet laughter. The photographs on the shelves no longer reminded Felix only of betrayal. They had become reminders that broken stories could continue instead of ending. That afternoon, someone knocked on the apartment door. Hyunjin opened it to find a neatly wrapped package with no return address. Inside was a handwritten card. "Some relationships are chosen, not arranged. I hope both of you never stop choosing each other." There was no signature, only a pressed white flower tucked inside the envelope. Hyungjin immediately recognized the handwriting. It was her, he said softly. Felix looked at the card. Your former fiance, Hyungjin nodded. I think this is her way of saying goodbye. Felix carefully placed the card back into the box. I hope she finds someone who chooses her first. Do I? They stood quietly for a moment, silently wishing happiness for someone whose kindness had helped set them both free. A few days later, Hyungjin received an unexpected phone call. His mother had been admitted to the hospital after collapsing from exhaustion. Without hesitation, Hyungjin and Felix rushed there. The sterile scent of disinfectant filled the bright corridors. Doctors assured them that it was not life-threatening, only the result of months of stress and overwork. Hyungjin sat beside his mother's bed as she slowly opened her eyes. You came, she whispered. Of course I came. She managed a weak smile. I kept thinking about your grandfather. Hyungjin squeezed her hand gently. He always believed our family could heal. Tears formed in her eyes. I want to believe that too. Hospital room remained quiet until the door opened once more. Hyungjin looked up. His father stepped inside. He appeared older than Hyungjin remembered. His once perfect posture had softened, and the confidence that had always surrounded him seemed to have faded. For several long seconds, father and son simply looked at one another. Finally, his father spoke. I heard you came immediately. Hyungjin nodded. She's my mother. His father lowered his head. I spent my whole life believing success meant never admitting I was wrong. His voice was barely above a whisper. I was wrong. Words surprised everyone in the room. He turned toward Hyungjin. I chose pride over my son. Silence filled the space. I don't expect forgiveness. Hyungjin looked at the man who had once seemed impossible to challenge. Now he simply looked tired, human. I can't pretend the past didn't happen, Hyungjin said quietly. I know. I don't want to carry hatred forever. His father's eyes filled with tears he could no longer hide. I'm sorry. The first time in many years Hyungjin embraced his father. It was not a perfect reconciliation. Years of pain could not disappear in a single afternoon, but it was a beginning. Felix watched from the doorway, a gentle smile appearing on his face. He understood something important. Love had not only changed Hyungjin, it had changed everyone willing to face the truth. That evening, after leaving the hospital together, Felix and Hyungjin walked home beneath softly falling snow. The city lights reflected across the frozen streets, making everything glow with quiet warmth. Hyungjin slipped his hand into Felix's. Thank you. Felix looked at him. What? For staying? Felix smiled. I almost didn't. I know. You did. Felix stopped walking. He reached into his coat pocket and took out the small silver ring. This time he placed it gently into Hyunjin's hand and closed Hyunjin's fingers around it. I told you it represented a promise we'd have to earn. Hyunjin nodded. You did. Felix's eyes shone beneath the winter lights. I think we've finally started earning it. Hyunjin smiled, his eyes filling with grateful tears. Without another word, they continued walking through the falling snow, leaving behind footprints side by side. The past would always remain part of them, but it no longer controlled where they were going. Ahead of them stretched an unwritten future, one built not on fear, expectations, or silence, but on a simple promise they chose to keep every single day. No more secrets, only the truth and the courage to face it together. Spring returned exactly 1 year after the night that had changed everything. The cherry blossom trees lining the riverbank were in full bloom, scattering pale pink petals across the quiet path where Felix and Hyunjin had walked countless times during the most difficult months of their lives. The air carried the fragrance of fresh flowers and warm sunlight, replacing every memory of cold rain and sleepless nights. So much had changed. Felix had found peace in creating art that reflected hope instead of heartbreak. His exhibitions slowly gained recognition, not because they were technically perfect, but because every painting carried unmistakable honesty. People often stood silently in front of his work, seeing pieces of their own lives hidden inside the colors. Hyunjin had opened a small design studio with a handful of close friends. It wasn't the powerful company his father had once imagined for him, but every project bore his own signature, his own dreams and his own choices. For the first time he built a future that belonged entirely to him. His relationship with his parents healed little by little. There were still difficult conversations and moments of regret, but they were no longer afraid of those conversations. They had learned that families did not become stronger by hiding painful truths. They became stronger by facing them together. One quiet afternoon, Felix received an invitation asking him to meet Hyunjin at the riverside where they had first spoken honestly after everything had fallen apart. When Felix arrived, Hyunjin was standing beneath a blooming cherry tree. He was smiling. Not the uncertain smile of someone asking to be forgiven, not the relieved smile of someone escaping guilt. It was the peaceful smile of someone who had finally become the person he wanted to be. You kept me waiting, Hyungjin teased gently. Felix laughed. Only 5 minutes. You still count. I always will. For a moment they simply watched the petals drift across the river, then Hyungjin reached into his pocket. Felix immediately recognized the small velvet box. Ring, he whispered. Hyungjin nodded. I carried it every day. He opened the box. The simple silver ring sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. A year ago, Hyungjin said softly, I wanted to give you this because I was afraid of losing you. He looked into Felix's eyes. Today I want to give it to you because I choose you, with nothing hidden, nothing promised by anyone else, and nothing left unsaid. Felix felt tears gather in his eyes. This time they were not tears of heartbreak. They were tears of relief, of healing, of finally reaching the place they had fought so hard to find. He extended his hand. Hyungjin gently slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly. Felix smiled through his tears. I don't love you because you're perfect. Hyunjin's eyes shimmered. Love you because you finally had the courage to become honest. You, Felix laughed softly. I stayed because I realized forgiveness isn't forgetting the past. He intertwined their fingers. It's deciding that someone's future matters more than their worst mistake. Around them, the wind carried thousands of cherry blossom petals into the sky. Children laughed nearby. An elderly couple walked slowly along the river. Musicians played a gentle melody in the distance. Life continued, ordinary and beautiful. Hyungjin rested his forehead against Felix's. I promise, Felix interrupted with a smile. No, Hyungjin blinked. No more promises. Why? Because promises are easy. Felix squeezed his hand. Let's choose each other every day instead. Hyungjin smiled wider than ever before. I can do that. Together they walked along the river without looking back. The message that had once shattered their world was now only a memory, a painful reminder that secrets could destroy love, but truth, though frightening, could also save it. Their story had never been about a broken engagement. It had never truly been about betrayal. It had always been about two imperfect people learning that love is not measured by grand declarations or flawless moments. It is measured by honesty, by courage, by the willingness to tell the truth before fear speaks louder than the heart. As the last cherry blossom petals disappeared into the flowing river, Felix looked at Hyungjin and smiled. For the first time there were no unanswered questions, no hidden messages, no silent fears, only two hearts forever changed by the truth, walking side by side toward a future they had chosen together. The end.